The divine right of kings, divine right, or God's mandate is a political and religious doctrine of royal and political legitimacy. It asserts that a monarch is subject to no earthly authority, deriving the right to rule directly from the will of God. The king is thus not subject to the will of his people, the aristocracy, or any other estate of the realm. It implies that only God can judge an unjust king, and that any attempt to depose, dethrone, or restrict his powers runs contrary to the will of God, and may constitute a sacrilegious act. It is often expressed in the phrase "by the grace of God," attached to the titles of a reigning monarch. Origins in the pagan world. Clarification needed. Kings were often seen as either ruling with the backing of heavenly powers or perhaps even being divine beings themselves. However, the Christian notion of a divine right of kings is traced to a story found in 1 Samuel, where the prophet Samuel anoints Saul, and then David as mashiach, or king over Israel. The anointing is to such an effect, that the monarch became inviolable, so that, even when Saul sought to kill David, David would not raise his hand against him, because he was the Lord's anointed. Adomnan of Iona is one of the earliest Christian proponents of this concept of kings ruling with divine right. He wrote of the Irish King Diarmait Cerbaill's assassination, and claimed that divine punishment fell on his assassin for the act of violating the monarch. Adomnan also recorded a story about St Columba supposedly being visited by an angel carrying a glass book, and telling him that he needed to ordain Aedan Gabrain as King of Dal Riata, but Columba initially refused, and to this response, the angel answered by whipping him, and demanding that he perform the ordination, because God had commanded it. The same angel then visited Columba on 3 successive nights, and then finally Columba agreed, and Aedan came to receive ordination. At the ordination, Columba told Aedan that, so long as he obeyed God's laws, then none of his enemies would prevail against him, but the moment he broke them, this protection would end, and the same whip with which he had been struck would be turned against the king. Adomnan's writings most likely influenced other Irish writers, who in turn influenced continental ideas as well. Pepin the Short's coronation may have also come from the same influence through the Carolingian dynasty, and the Holy Roman Emperors also influenced all subsequent Western ideas of kingship. In the Middle Ages, the idea that God had granted earthly power to the monarch, just as he had given spiritual authority and power to the church, especially to the Pope, was already a well-known concept long before later writers coined the term divine right of kings, and employed it as a theory in political science. For example, Richard I of England declared at his trial during the Diet at Speyer in 1193, "I am born in a rank which recognizes no superior but God, to whom alone I am responsible for my actions," and it was Richard who first used the motto "Do et mon droit God and my right," which is still the motto of the monarch of the United Kingdom. The immediate author of the theory was Jane Bodin, citation needed, who based it on the interpretation of Roman law. With the rise of nation-states, and the Protestant Reformation, the theory of divine right justified the king's absolute authority in both political and spiritual matters. The theory came to the fore in England under the reign of James I of England 1603-1625, who was also James VI of Scotland 1567-1625. Louis XIV of France 1643-1715 strongly promoted the theory as well,